Okay, welcome everyone to our class on Darkei Gemara. We're in the penultimate chapter, almost next to the last there, and the Yitzhak is describing the use of language in two different ways. Before he told us the general use in expressing our ideas, statements, what type of language we should express. Now he's telling us about the language of Masav Matan, that specific language that is used between the Chachamim when they debate issues. So we're going through this list. I think it has 20-odd some terms, and what I tried to do here is to bring examples, so that'll be more meaningful and, to us as we go through the concepts. Just the definition is a little too brief, as we just learned in Sefer Melitza, that when you're trying to explain things, you have to elaborate. I remember Rabbi Goldstein used to say that Rabbi Soloveitchik used to say, "Spell it out." That's what he used to tell the people: spell it out. When you elaborate, you begin to think about your ideas clearly, and you also express what you're saying clearly. And a lot of things that you thought you were saying or thinking all of a sudden look differently when you start to spell things out. So we're going to spell these things out. We're up to Iyamarta B'Shlema. And he says like this. What is it? Iyamarta B'Shlema. Who כשיש קושיה בדבריו נגד הצד אחד וכנגד הצד השני אין בו קושיה. Iyamarta B'Shlema is when, this is what we learned in Dirk Tfunos, the dilemma. The dilemma gives you all the sides. Most of the times it's two, but it could be more. The dilemma explains all the sides to understand something, and then usually impels you on the horns of the dilemma. It gets you into a difficult situation. Yes, that's the sign of Akasha. Okay. There's a dilemma that he's going to describe now where only one side is going to be good and the other side is not going to be good. There's a kasha on your words on one side, but not on the second side. So let's look at an example of that. I have a Gemara again in Baba Kama, page base, that says the following. Boy Rev Abba Ba Memo. Bishu Yashan Umeis Mahu. An interesting question. You know you're not supposed to embarrass anyone. And it's called a nezik, and you have to pay if you do it. So what happens if a person embarrasses a dead person? So the Gemara says, what's the problem? Probably thought it was quite simple. He's dead, so why is it shayach? So Oma Rav Zvid, this is the question. It's a two-sided question. Mishum kasufahu is the reason why you pay is because you embarrass someone. V'haimes leislei kasufa, and of course the person who's dead can't be embarrassed. Odila mishum zilusahu v'hu oslei, or maybe it's because you cheapened the person's value, and this person was cheapened. You belittled him. Okay, so belittling him is in the eyes of others, correct? Embarrassment is something only that the person can feel. So if he's dead, he doesn't feel. But belittlement is he doesn't have to be alive to be belittled. So maybe you have to pay him because you're not allowed to belittle him. That was the two sides of the question. So a Pshitas was brought, text that says the following: Reb Meir Omer, Cheresh v'Katan yesh lahem boshus. A shota ain't no boshus. A person who can't hear, or if he's underage, so they are in the law of embarrassment. but an insane person does not fit under that law. So now we're going to use our dilemma and say, Iyamarta b'shlema mishum ziluse. If you're saying that the reason why you pay for boshus is because of belittlement, hainu the katani katan. So now we can understand why the katan is in the halacha of being belittled. Ela Iyamarta mishum kisufa katan ba bloshasu. If you're going to say it's because of embarrassment, does a little kid get embarrassed? He doesn't understand these things of embarrassment. He's totally oblivious to it. So here we show that there's two possibilities in the question, and on one side it didn't make any sense, right? If it's because of embarrassment, then the katan you should not have to pay. So it must be because it's ilusa, because that is shaykh. So although this is not an example of a kasha that was asked on one person, but it is a question of pshitas, but the point is that Iyamarta b'shlema is a way of saying, according to one theory, there's no problem. According to the second theory, there is a problem. Okay.
Right, so saying Iyamarta b'shlema is saying mishum zilusa means that it makes sense. So right. If it's a katan. So that's what and because that's interesting, on the next line it says Iyamarta without the word b'shlema.
Right. Now it was very yes, it wasn't easy for me to find these texts, I thought it would be much easier. For some reason I had a lot of difficulty, because some of them, again, if I get into this, we can understand almost on the spot, but if you're in the middle of a very shaklavataria, so it doesn't work as easily. But let's just see. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one is the classic mamanavshach. Mamanavshach is not when there's one way out, right? Here there's no way out, right? As we said, the dilemma. Okay, so when you see mamanavshach, you can expect to say, Iyamarta b'shlema says at least there's one way to solve the problem. Okay, but here mamanavshach says no matter which way you go, there's no getting out of this problem. Hu kesheyesh kushel kol tzad. When there's a kasha on you from every side. Shor shel Yisrael nagach shor shel Kanani is potter. Okay, if a Jewish shore gores a Kanani shore, so the Jew does and damages him, of course, the Jew doesn't have to pay. But the opposite, if the Kanani, the shore of the Kananis, nagach shor shel Yisrael, ben tam ben muad Vishalam Nezek Shalom. But if the Kanani shore gores a Jewish shore, it doesn't matter if it's the first or third time, the Kanani has to pay to the Jew full damages. So the question is like the Gemara says, mamanavshach. This statement doesn't make any sense at all. Why? Because the Torah says, Keshigach shor reyehu. Okay, when your shore damages the shore of your neighbor. Neighbor always means Jew. So this halacha doesn't make sense. Why? In the Mishnah. Ireu dafka, if Re'eu is used in the Torah, that means only a Jewish person. You only pay when you damage a Jewish person. So afilu Kanani ki nagis Yisrael liftor. Says even a Kanani that gores a Jewish person should be potter, because the only person that's in damages is Re'ehu, ki yigash shor Re'ehu. He's not your Re'ehu, so he doesn't have to pay. The Re'ehu lav dafka, and if you're saying no, Re'ehu just means, it's a general word that means, people, friends, but doesn't mean Jew. So then the fil Yisrael, the Nagach Kanani, should be chayev. So then even the Yisrael should be chayev. So no matter which way you turn it, Re'ehu either has to be dafka or lav dafka. There's only two choices. That's the classic dilemma. Okay? If Re'ehu is dafka, so the only people that are in the loss of damages are Jews. The Kanani shouldn't have to pay anything. If Re'ehu is lav dafka, so then even a Jew should pay a Kanani. So that's a amount of shach. Now, we learned in Derek Funos, the way to get out of the amount of shach is either to grab the bull by the horns or to escape through the horns of the bull, which means either if the person gives you two possibilities, you create a third one. That's called escaping through the horns of the bull. And the other one is by grabbing the horns, where you show that one of the if-thens there is not true. Okay, you could still have Re'ehu, and you explain to me why the Kanani is chayav, or you can have Lavdav Re'ehu, and you explain to me why the Kanani, the Jew is part. Okay, but that's the whole discussion that we had in Tfunos. Okay, but he simply tells us, Minmanu Shach, watch out, because what's going to do is we're going to be presented with two sides or more, and you're going to see that each side is going to lead to impossibility. So, as we learned here. Okay, now the Ihachi, he says, Kvar Meforsh Lamali gave a long explanation in Semintet, so we won't go through it, just back there. Here's that famous Ella. Ella is one of the first things that I ever learned. It always means a changing of direction, a cancellation of what went before, and starting a new idea. Let's see how he describes it. A very important word in the Gemara. Hu keshechozeh misvara so harishona mikoach kushish yesh kenegdo. It's when a person retracts from a svara because of some kasha. Who ke'ein harder be. It's like harder means I retract. Okay, so whenever you see Ella, you know it's a retraction. Here's a little example from Baba Kama Tes Amar Aleph. Omer Rav Asi, Omer Rav Zera, Omer Rav Huna. The mitzvah ad shlish. Okay, the text says that according to these wonderful rabbis, in the name of Rav Huna, it says that you should spend a third of your money to do a mitzvah. So the Gemara says, my shlish. What does it mean, a third of your money? Ilema, shlish, beso, if it means a third of all your money. So elameata, ietramele shlosh mitzvahs, leisev l'kula beso. Now if you have 3 mitzvahs, you're going to give away all your property. All right? So even though the simple text says for a mitzvah you have to pay up to a third of your property, if that's what it meant, that means after you did 3 mitzvahs, you'd have nothing left. Ella, so we retract. We say, no, it doesn't mean to pay 1/3 of your property for each mitzvah. Ella Omer Rav Zera, the hidur mitzvah. It's talking about doing a hidur mitzvah, not the mitzvah itself, but the hidur mitzvah, ad shlish mitzvah. When it comes to doing a mitzvah, if you want to know how much more you should spend than the market price of the lulav, esrog, tzitzis, so you should go up to a third of the price. Okay, so if it costs $100, just be $133, whatever. Okay, so here's the Ella. The Ella is always a word of retraction. Okay, we had a kasha here. If the text meant simply a third of your house, after 3 mitzvahs you'd have no property at all. So Ella's retraction does not mean the third of all your property, but it means how far do you go with a hidur mitzvah. Okay, that was Ella. Now, Ella Vadai, I could, believe it or not, I could not find in the Gemara when I searched. I found it a lot in Meforshim, so I'm going to just leave that for a while. I found it in Meforshim. Maybe I should have brought one of the examples in the Meforshim. When I did a search, I couldn't find it. But he says like this: Ella Vadai means hu kesher mechazek svaras behechrach gomo. It's when you strengthen your svara because you have a very strong force to do it. O b'tainis nitzachis, o behechrach hareikus. Tainis nitzachis is a direct proof, and the hekesh reikus means the proof from a hekesh mechalek. Okay, I'm going to prove B because it's either A or B, and since it's not A, it must be B. So his point is that when you say elavada, since it can't be A, elavada, it must be B, and I'm correct. Okay, or you can do it with a direct proof. But it was interesting. I could not find a specific language, and maybe your search program is better than mine, but I should have called Shaskon. Okay, this one is Elamai Islecha Lamema. Elamai Islecha. Well, what do you have to say? So he says like this: Hu kasher hamanaged bola hachicho dato mitzad shemak shelachavaro marma acher ubehechrach yesh leforish hamarma ahu v'yaviu raya mimenu. A person is disagreeing with someone. He brings a statement, and he says this statement is going to be very difficult to you, and it's going to work out fine for me. So the person says, "V'omer lo," so he says to him, "Elamai yischal meima." To me, it's wonderful, but what do you have to say about it? Hasam ba'oso mamro inyan, about that text. So behechrach yishchalom mashani omer. You have to say what I said. V'achar kach omer oso kain b'zeh makom v'lo tiksha midi, and therefore we'll say the same thing here, and it won't be a problem. Let's take a live example. Those words were pretty hard to conceive. But here, let's take a live example. He says the following. Esave Abaya L'Rava. So Abaya asked the Rava. What's on the floor here is whether Yeush is Kona or not. If someone gives up on an object, does the person who have the object acquire the object after the person, the original owner, gave up?
Famous Gemara.
So,
it's in the beginning of Lulav Gazal also.
Exactly. This is one of the Gemara. I mean, it's a mainstay. So here we have Esve. We have a kasha that Abaya asks on Rabba. The pasuk says korbano. When you offer sacrifice, it should be when he offers his sacrifice. It says. So we learn out he has to. When you offer sacrifice, it has to be yours. It has to be his v'lo hagozo. Right? You can't bring a sacrifice from stolen property. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Okay, let's investigate that. Diuk. It has to be his korban and not some korban that he stole. Hey chidami. Remember we said, how can we conceive of this? Ilema lifnei yeyush. If we say that he stole the korban and the original owner had not yet given up on getting it back, so lamali kro peshita. It's obvious that you can't use stolen property. It's not yours. What type of korban can you offer? I mean, if it's not yours, so you're supposed to bring a korban. It's not your korban, so what type of korban is that? Elalav, so you're forced to say that we're talking about after Yehush. He stole the item, stole the korban from Mr. A, and then Mr. A was miyayesh. So now we see that the pasuk says it's no good. Shma minei Yehush lo kona. So it must be that since this korban, the original owner was not miyayesh, and the fact is you can't use it, so it means it's not yours, right? So Yehush is lo kona, it must mean, right? Because if Yehush was kona, it would be considered yours. It's not considered yours. So we have a raya here for the concept that Yehush is not kona, and Rabbo wanted to say Yehush is kona. Okay, so that's the situation. So now we have the defense. Omole Rava defends, and he says back to Abaya. Ulataimech or the Tanya. I'll bring you another text. This text says, different concept altogether. It's talking about Zav. And the Torah says Mishkavo. He's matama if he touches his, if he sat on a bed, on his bed, he's matama. He gets tame Zav. Zav sat on the bed. Now he sat on the bed. That's very nice. Now since it's his bed, he's matama. So the Gemara makes the same diuk. It says mishkavo v'lo hagazol. the only way that the person is metama is if he sits on his metama bed. But if he stole a bed, it wasn't his, he stole it, it was someone else's bed, and the bed happened to be Tumazab, and he sat on it, he wouldn't be metama. So we said like this, hey Chidami, let's investigate this. What is this case talking about? Ilema de Gazel Imra Va'avde Mishkav. Well, we're talking about the case where he stole the bed and he sat on it. Well, what happened? Well, maybe he sold wool, he stole actually the wool, and he made it into a bed, okay? He made it into a bedspread, let's say, okay? So if that's the case, that doesn't make any. Everybody holds that if you take wool and you make it into a bedspread, since you change the object, you definitely would be kona, okay? So it couldn't be that he stole wool and he changed it into a bed and changed it into, let's say, a bedspread, because that would be obvious that that's called his, right? So the fact that he stole it was not going to be a patur. So we're forced to say, Elamai, yeah. We're forced to say, Elamai Yischalamem, I should do all of that. What must you say? Elamai Yischalamem. The Gazel Mishkav the Chavrei, that he stole the bedding of his friend. Okay, so he stole the bedding of his friend, and what happened? What does it say? He stole the bedding of his friend, and he's not metama, right? So it must mean that that Yeish is kona, right? He stole the bedding of his friend. He sat on it. He's not metama. It must be that the Yeish is kona. So what are you going to say to that? If you're going to hold it, Yeish is not kona, how are you going to answer? So you're forced to say, the Gazel Mishkav L'Chavrei, you're forced to say that he sold the bed of his friend. And that's what the pasuk is talking about. In other words, when the pasuk said Mishkavo, it doesn't mean that he stole wool and he made it into a blanket. It means he stole the bedding of his friend. He stole the bedding of his friend, and he sat on it. Therefore, just give me 1 second. I just lost the thought here.
So therefore, he doesn't need a Shinei Maisa. Therefore, there's no Shinei Maisa.
And therefore?
And therefore, he's not kind of without Yish. You have to have Yish. Because the Elam is Elam, because Mishkav, if he stole, Niklamandim Shinei Maisa like Kani, and therefore he's kind of Shinei Maisa even without Yish. And therefore he didn't have to change it, and therefore the only way for him to be kind of was with Yish.
Right.
So
how you
by the carbon
yes,
also, the carbon he stole the carbon, which was already a carbon, and therefore the only way to acquire it was through Yish. Right? Is that the right shot?
So you
don't have a right Yish is not kaina.
Right. Why? Spell it out. Why do you have a right where it's nice kaina now?
Because, okay, so the reason why we need a pasuk to tell you that I'm sorry, let me go back here. And it's still telling you that it's not yours. It's trying to use the honey. Right, let's run through this again. So Rabba answered, right, if you're going to say that we're talking about a case where there was Yish, so it says Mishkav Mishkav, I'm going to look at Rashi here.
Yeah, look at Rashi. Yeah.
I don't have a Gemara in front of me.
Oh, you don't have Rashi there. I'm sorry.
No. I could get one.
Print Rashi. I didn't get to this.
You'll
get one.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. I have one here also. Samach Vav. Oh boy. Oh boy. 1 second.
Okay. That was the question Shmami Yush Lakani is saying that Yish is not Kaina because we're saying that it's talking about Le'achi Yish, and the Pasuk still is telling you that you can't bring it as a carbon because it's not carbonai. So Rabbi says if he's saying that Yish is not Kaina, so then it says in the Brisa, that we must be talking about where he stole the Mishkav the Chavrei, and that's where the Pasuk is telling you Mishkavai.
And even though he stole the Mishkav the Chavrei.
So here too,
he's not Matame. He's
it
not.
must
Matame,
be that he
right?
stole the carbon the Chavrei, if there was already Hukdash. So what's the question on Rabbah?
So if he stole the korban of his friend,
I gotta go back.
so really, Yeush is Kona. So how does it help? If Yeush is Kona, and he stole the korban of his friend, oh, it's other Rabbi. Yeush is Kona, yeah, that's what Rashi says. Yeush is Kona, correct? And therefore the korban really is to the thief. And the chiddush is that the person who was stolen from is not Yotzi. That's what Rashi says, right?
Right. I have to go back and see what
Rashi there.
Yeah,
read the Rashi.
I'm looking.
Yeah,
I was looking at the Art Scroll quickly, the Hebrew Art Scroll.
Okay, no, just Rashi is very simple. I didn't bring it in because of, unfortunately, I should have. But that's what Rashi says. So really, Yeush is Kona.
The goals are coming to Chavrei. Shik the Chavrei la'olam l'fnei Yeush. V'etzrach lashmin and de'ina oila rotzim kal afi l'bayim.
What, it's before Yeush, Rashi says? The first, there's two truths in Rashi.
Right.
Oh, yeah, let me get
Lashon Acher. Yeah, the goals are coming to
first
Chavrei.
teresh. What was the
Shehikdish Chavrei, that his friend was Magdash Karmel, Oilam Lefnei Yish, and really it's Lefnei Yish. It's Truchlash Me'in De'ina Oil Ratzin Klal, and it's coming to tell you that it does not, you cannot bring it for a carbon, but Afilu Bailam Harishainim, V'avagav Duloi have a Yish.
Right.
And Lashon Acher is the goals are coming to Chavrei.
Right. So it's not,
right.
Yeah, okay. You got it?
So everything is not, there's no Yish. The goals are
right. So we're not talking about Yish, we're talking
right.
before Yish.
Before
And what's the
Yish,
tradition? Even though there's no Yish, right?
He still
So the first Baal is not Yish.
Cannot bring it,
that's
right. Not yet. Right, that's the Chiddush.
Right?
Right.
Okay, so, okay.
So what are we doing here? We're doing again
We're Elamayas Lamemi here. So the way you answered, okay, again, we have to get in. Okay. But the point is, he brought the other take of Mishkavo. He forced him to say that we're not talking about his own Mishkav. He's talking about the Mishkav of his friend.
Right.
That's what he forced him to do. Elamayas Lamemi, you have a problem now with this other text, right? Because even according to you, I mean, no, not because it has nothing to do with Yesh, but the point is that if we're talking about simply a Shinui Maisa, then it's obvious that it's Kona, right? And there's no Chiddush in the pasuk because Ivade will be Tameh, right? So in that text, what are you forced to say? So it must be that Mishkavo comes to eliminate stealing an item of your friend. So just how you answered over there, I'm going to answer over here, that we're talking about stealing the friend, not you yourself. Okay.
Okay, very good.
All right.